Hello. Now, a while ago I said I was going to do a series of videos which were kind of going back to basics on the elemental archetypes and just looking at the archetypes individually for a start, because a lot of what I've done on the videos has been looking at all of the relationships between the archetypes and the elements. So I think it'd be good to just go back to some basic stuff and just look at these archetypes, which are different ways of seeing, different ways of being, different worlds that people experience, essentially, because they're based on quite different forms of consciousness. Now, in order to do this, I'm not going to just sort of like go through the circle of archetypes in a specific order. What I've done is I've put the little bits of paper with the designations of the different archetypes in this ice cream box, and I'm going to actually sort of like shake it about and pick one out at random, and that'll be my start, and that's how I'll kind of continue with it. Okay, so here we go. Now I'll just close my eyes as well. Here's the first one, okay? And the first one we're going to start with is Earth and Air, which is the Matriarch. So that'll be the first archetype that we start with. Now the Matriarch, which was originally called the Old Woman, is an archetype which characterizes a consciousness made up of earth and air elementally, with earth being the most predominant element. It is possible to think of these elemental combinations as the first element, the most predominant element being the outer element, the manifestation, the expression, and the second element being, in a sense, its inner or its core. It's possible to think of it that way. That's one way of thinking of it. So we see with the Matriarch, she's very practical. It's earth, but where she's coming from, in a sense, is air, in a way. She's bringing about clarity. She's bringing about she's bringing about clarity, really. The thing is that this combination is very dry. And you see her appear in all sorts of fairy stories and myths. So she's a kind of, she can be like an old Mother Hubbard figure. There are various, wise old women in all sorts of stories, and she is a wise figure, and at her best, she's a highly protective and wise figure. Now, she's a very careful figure. It's a very careful kind of consciousness. It's a consciousness which is very concerned, as you would expect, with the material world and with materiality. And it's concerned with organizing and exploiting and averting problems and planning and getting the best return on things. It's a consciousness which is very aware of what the cost of things are, whether emotionally or physically or spiritually or in whatever way. So it's a very useful consciousness. It has a great deal of discrimination to it, and it can understand. It understands the bottom line in terms of life, in terms of material life, and that is absolutely its concern. It will absolutely have its bottom line secured, if you see what I mean, and it will have things insured, and it will have things controlled, and it will have things contracted, if you see what I mean. So you can see where the air element is kind of coming in as well. It's a great accumulator of things. It stores things and categorizes them and puts them all in their place for use at a future time. But it tends to accumulate for that reason. It accumulates knowledge also. It accumulates lore. It accumulates lore in a because it's earth first, it accumulates it in a fairly organic way, although it is very dry. So it's things like the accumulation of herbal lore over generations and generations and generations, and this passing on through this kind of like network, this grapevine, this very dry grapevine of knowledge passed on of things acquired. So yes, it's a very useful, very protective, immensely useful archetype, and an immensely useful consciousness for coping with life, coping with the world, making sure that everything stays safe, making sure that everything stays workable, making sure that you haven't overlooked some hidden price to things which is going to have to be paid in future. And so it's very good at this sort of stuff. Now, when it turns negative, it becomes controlling, worrying, judgmental. It can be vindictive, and it will try to control things. Yeah, it will try and just overly control things and shut down on things. The air-earth archetypes are not very vital, in terms of life force somehow. Of course, in terms of apparent life force, dynamically speaking, because both of its elements are somewhat non-dynamic. So there's a tendency for the air and earth archetypes to go towards a kind of, a sort of lifelessness in some ways. Yeah, they're not full of life by any means. They don't see the point to it. It's not what they're about. So they can be quite deadening. They can be quite restrictive if they're negative. They can really shut down on things, shut down on expression. This is the consciousness that calls the cops when the kids are just having a little bit too much fun or something. So it's that kind of thing, and you can see how it gets that way. It gets that way through being blocked, and then when it's blocked, it loses its clarity, and it becomes paranoid, and it sees threats to its bottom line everywhere, and that's what it can't have. And so then it's going to call in reinforcements, basically, someone to sort things out for it. Yeah, but it's, in its positive sense, it's a tremendously useful. Consciousness and a useful archetype, and you can see it. You could imagine it as you can see it in things like banks and banking and commerce and shopkeeping and stock taking, and you could imagine like the sort of commercial matriarch of the village in the village square at her stall or whatever, and basically aware of everybody, what everyone's about, what she can get from who, and what the prices are, and what she needs to do in order to maintain her place in this web, if you see what I mean. And on that point, there is something almost spinner-like about the matriarch. She spins things, she weaves things, she actually can weave a pattern into life in that sense, and that's another one of her rather magical qualities. And at her best, she's a tremendously protective force, and she can, and that can, when she is balanced with sort of like other qualities, and on her highest form, she's tremendously protective. I mean, and you can see her in figures like Dame Holder in Norse mythology, who is an old woman who, one of the things she does is she wanders through the world looking for her lost children. And there's this sense of, there's a compassionate side to this archetype and this consciousness also. And you can find that in these archetypes. When these archetypes come into virtue, they express highly positive qualities to them. So that's the matriarch, First off, she was known as the old woman, tending to call her the matriarch nowadays, at least the people I know do. And earth and air, highly efficient, highly caring in a material sense, yeah, protective, and a great weaver of patterns and a great collector of certain kinds of organic knowledge and law and wisdom in that sense. So that's the matriarch, and that's our first look at the archetypes in our Back to Basics series.